guys, my name is Anna, you're watching SimCue, and without further ado, let's get into this video. Today we are building townhouses in Brindleton Bay, and I'm weirdly excited about this. After having built the tiny house, which you saw last week, I looked around the world and I found that I actually really like Brindleton Bay, which was a little bit surprising. Even though by now it's such an old pack, I haven't really been playing nor building in it, so it was the first time I really had a proper look at some of the lots, and I really like the one that I found here for this build. So it's just called It's a Good House, and it is located in the same area as the vet clinic, but it's also just such a big lot with only one house in the middle, which is like typical EA. And if you look around the vet clinic, I actually do think it seems to be quite close to what seems like a more city-like area. So I feel like just having one house on such a vast lot didn't really make sense for this area, which is why I instead decided to build 4 townhouses where you've already seen me do the floor plan for them. So we're currently adding doors and windows. I looked through the doors and windows that came with each pack beforehand and found that the best ones were definitely ones from Cottage Living, because the ones that came with cats and dogs are just very specific. I feel like they didn't really match a townhouse vibe, and also there weren't that many different ones. Whereas with Cottage Living, I feel like it's the pack that we might have gotten like the most windows from, because we have like 3 full sets, and I was very keen on making townhouses that somewhat matched each other but at the same time were a little bit different. So the ones to the right have these cute white windows with the shutters, and the ones to the left have these windows that have more of like a stone border. So I wanted our townhouses to have a front garden, and this turned out to be more of a challenge than I expected, because classic Sims 4, I struggled so much with finding a metal fence that had a matching metal gate but also a matching metal railing. So the set we have here is from Get Together, and I actually really like the gate, and then I struggled a little bit with some half walls trying to create a bit more privacy, but in the end I go in with like 2 sets of staircases so I can get the railing in the middle, because the half wall kept struggling with the foundation and also just didn't look quite as good. And then I realized that this fence from Get Together doesn't have a matching railing, which really bothered me, but then I realized that the vampires wouldn't have railing and fence that matches, but I had completely forgotten that it only comes with this like huge gate, so that didn't really work either. And then I looked through the base game ones again, because I thought that if it was base game for sure I would be able to find something that matched. That still wasn't possible. So what you saw at the end was a compromise with a base game fence that actually had a matching base game railing, but then still using the gate from Get Together. So for the wallpaper, I knew that I wanted the 2 townhouses on the right to be a lighter color and then have the ones on the left be a darker color. So I tried out a lot of different bricks trying to find something with a reddish tone and see if I could somehow get it to match the actual like stone border on the windows. And I tested even more swatches than the ones that you are watching, because I did cut parts of it out as very repetitive, but I just wanted to keep part of it in because this is so real, just going through so many different swatches, finally find the perfect one. But it was also at this time that I kind of confirmed that I did want them to match one another, but I still want them to be a little bit different. So specifically the townhouses on the left also have 2 different sets of wallpaper. Now going in with my favorite column, the straight column from Get Together, that I honestly feel is such a shame isn't just added to the base game because we need it so badly. But I really liked how it added a bit more structure and also sort of divided the 2 townhouses in the middle. And then from here on we'll be getting into doing a simple roof and then adding the rest of the windows, which is also why I only wanted to do like 2 townhouses side by side, because even though I do find that it is quite common that you have like a long row of townhouses and then they don't really have any windows on the side, I just prefer that because I am a sucker for natural light, so I want to add that in the game as well. And so doing it this way also kept the floor plan really simple, because it's only really the hallways on both floors that don't have any windows. So the idea for the townhouses was originally because I wanted to do something that was like Easter inspired, and I thought it would be really cute to do these like pastel townhouses next to one another. But then looking at some reference pictures, I kind of scrapped the idea because I very quickly just fell in love with townhouses in general, and I definitely preferred the ones that were made from brick, and I think that's because that's also what I see in my own town. And then the idea was to actually find a lot that was in a world that was a bit more city-like, so I did look at North Haven, but I also knew that the vision I had for the townhouses wouldn't really match North Haven. But like I've already mentioned, because of the tiny house, I just kept coming back to Brindleton Bay and eventually knew that I just had to build in this world. And so the idea with these townhouses, which you will also see at the end, is that they are very welcoming to pets and also great for families. In the beginning, my plan was to just furnish one of them and leave the others empty, but then as I went along, I had so many ideas for how these could be furnished and be like very different. And while I don't play a lot with actual Sims, I do like telling stories through my built. So I had all of these ideas of these families that could live here and the reasons why they chose the different things that they did. And I just want to tell that story. So here we are. So we are currently in the townhouse to the furthest right, which has the green shutter. So I will refer to it as the green townhouse, which is also why we have a green kitchen. This is the one from Cottage Living. I absolutely love it. I think it's so gorgeous. And especially I love the sink and the fridge. So the story for this townhouse is that it is an elderly couple living here, and they have been keeping it up and been renovating it along the way, but they've always kept it in the same style as the townhouse was originally. So they have been living here for the majority of their lives. They've also raised their own child here, and we will see that their room has been turned into a guest room. And while these townhouses are going to act as apartments, I don't believe them to be rented. I do think that the people living here own the townhouse. And so this elderly couple bought it at a time where it wasn't quite as expensive and it wasn't anything luxurious at all, and they've just been keeping it up. And by now, these are some quite expensive townhouses is what I imagine. Because if you take a look around the area, they are quite close to what seems to be a slightly bigger city, also with the vet clinic and a big park. But at the same time, it feels like a very open space. And while you do have the neighbors from the townhouses, it's otherwise not that close to anyone else. So this elderly couple is by now sitting on an absolute gold mine, but they are just living their life, enjoying their little townhouse, and they spend most of their lives here and just want to continue doing so. If along the way you find that I'm doing things in a bit of an odd order, that is kind of true. I think it is because I'm furnishing like 4 townhouses, so I kept to my general pattern, which is like getting the shell down and then doing all of the furnishing. But for furniture, I only do the main pieces, and then I sort of move on and I decorate at the very end. So we do sort of skip ahead a little bit and then we go back, and I'm sorry, but that is just what works when I am building. So we are currently in the bedroom, and in general for this townhouse, for this elderly couple, I really liked using all of the items from Cottage Living and Cats and Dogs. They work quite well together, I actually found, which was a little bit surprising again, because we just often have the issue of things not matching. And I also just found that these packs specifically had such like grandma and grandpa vibes, so of course I had to use them. But furnishing this bedroom was definitely when I realized that these townhouses were actually a bit bigger than I kind of thought to begin with. I felt like I was doing them quite small, but we ended up with a lot more space than I had anticipated. I feel like maybe that isn't very realistic, because if these are very old townhouses, they would probably have been like even slimmer and just even more like compact to save space and therefore also save some money. But in The Sims 4, I guess it's quite nice to have some bigger rooms. So we're now moving on to what used to be their child's bedroom, but is now a guest room. Next to it, we do have a small office, which you did not see me furnish, and that is on purpose because furnishing 4 townhouses also meant a lot of footage, the equivalent of doing like 4 houses basically. So quite a lot of footage did have to be cut, but also because I found that it was a bit better to save some time on the speed build and then spend a little bit more time on doing a tour of these townhouses. But for this guest room, I also added a little crochet corner, and I feel like the lady of the house goes up here whenever she wants to be alone and just sits and crochet in her little comfortable chair. And then I purposely decided to add a bit of a like mismatch with the furniture, because I feel like for some couples, and maybe especially for elderly couples, it's like items that they've had for so long and it doesn't really work together, but they haven't changed it whatsoever. And I also felt that for a guest room, it made sense to have a lot of storage. That is also why we've added both a drawer set and cabinet. But we are now moving on to the townhouse next to it. I refer to this as the blue townhouse because of the blue shutters. And for this kitchen, I did decide to use the new country kitchen. And when I say new, what I really mean is that it is currently free on the marketplace. So this is new for me because otherwise I would have not invested in it, both because of the current buyout and that whole situation, but also just because I never really been a big fan of kits, to be honest. I own a few of them because I found that they have some more unique pieces, but I also feel like there are just a lot of kits that seem a little bit repetitive of things we might get with other packs. So even though it came out so much later, I felt like once you had Cottage Living, you didn't really need this pack. But since it's up for free, I did of course go ahead and download it, because I feel like anything we can grab for free, we should just grab it, take it, have it. I mean, we paid so much for this game and they are currently just destroying it, so get it while it's free, I guess. But even though everything go really well together and it is a very cute kitchen, I did actually struggle a little bit with the color scheme, because I knew that for this townhouse I wanted to use a lot of different colors and also sort of mix match them. But I think because it was my first time ever seeing the country kitchen, I was a little bit surprised at some of the colors. I did really enjoy it, and especially seeing the purple one because we just have so few purple items. But since I wasn't very familiar familiar with it. It just took me a bit of time to figure out what colors I really wanted to go together. So it might seem a bit crazy, but these are the colors we end up going with these like green counters and then orange fridge and stove, which definitely made choosing a table and also dining chairs a little bit more difficult, because for this townhouse I really wanted to try and challenge myself a little bit and sort of mix some more like old school furniture with some more modern pieces, because I feel like if you do it well it just works and look great, but if you're a little bit off it looks really whack. So I guess I'll leave it up to you guys to decide whether this was done well or it's just completely whack. But the other reason why I wanted to mix styles aside from just the challenge in itself is because the elderly couple that we just talked about that lived next door, their child moved out, went to the city to study, eventually met their partner, had twins, and then they decided that they needed some extra hands on deck. So when the townhouse next door was up for grabs, they decided to move out of the big city back to Brindleton Bay to raise their children. And I imagine that financially they probably got a little bit of help from the grandparents, and then they also went ahead and renovated the place, but keeping in the same style as it originally was. And in general they are just two colorful personalities, so they like colored the cabinets green and then bought a new like stove and fridge in orange. And yeah, I just absolutely love decorating with a lot of color and like telling all of these stories as to why people chose to furnish the way that they did. Now unfortunately for the bedrooms for the children I forgot to press record, so I don't actually have any footage of me decorating those two rooms, but you will of course see it at the tour at the end. So from the bedroom we will be moving on to the living room, and I think it was very important for me for this townhouse specifically to just show that it is a family where the children comes first. So while I do come back to decorate everything, which you will also see at the end at the tour, because footage of me decorating I personally just find like when I edit it it's super boring, so it is completely cut out also to save a bit of space. But this living room is actually quite decorated from the very beginning, and it is because at the early stages what really is important to me is just to like get the vibe of the room. I know I sometimes use that word a lot, but I don't really know what else to say. It's very much a feeling, a process of how do I feel about this. But often that can be done with just a few pieces of furniture, and then I can sort of imagine what the end result is going to look like, and then I move on. And at other times I just have a few more ideas that I need to see if they really work, and I end up decorating a little bit more than I otherwise would. Before this room I really liked how many toys I was able to squeeze in, and also the two desks at the window where the children can sit and do their crafts and also be on the computer. I just feel like for a family that really want to spend as much time together as possible, it makes great sense that the living room is like the heart of the house. And then I also added those frames from Growing Together, because I feel like if you actually want to play in this, it would make so much sense for this family to add a lot of family photos. So we're now moving on to the two townhouses on the left. These are a little bit bigger, and this one we're currently working on I like to refer to as the old townhouse. So for this townhouse the story is that the family of four were just able to afford this, but it hasn't been renovated whatsoever. And I imagine that for a lot of the rooms there used to be carpet, but then they removed the carpet when moving in, and now they're just these like old floorboards. So this townhouse has a very old and outdated kitchen and also all of the old tiles on both of the bathrooms, and their plan is to eventually renovate it, but right now they've thrown all their money into actually purchasing the home. And I do think that this family also used to live in a slightly bigger city but then moved here for the peace and quiet, and so I gave them a lot more modern furniture. In general this townhouse has a lot more items from Growing Together, items that I absolutely love, but they're still settling in and making plans for what they want it to actually look like once they've saved up enough money to renovate the kitchen and the bathrooms. So this family has a child that is very much into everything space, and even though you didn't get to see the other children's bedroom, I do feel like this child is pretty good friends with the neighbor right across from them, who's a big fan of dinosaurs. If you watch my latest video you will know that I'm someone who heavily believes that dinosaurs is what connects everyone, but that is just a little side note. The oldest child is a teenager, and I was so happy to finally get to use this beautiful bed that we got with an update once upon a time. I will have to admit that I did have to look up what the colors of the flags represent because I was a bit unsure. I primarily know the pride flag, but if I am not mistaken this one is the lesbian one, and if that is correct, I mean the lesbians won. Like this color scheme is just so pretty, and I really like how the decorations for the teenage room turned out, and you will see that at the end with everything else. So here in the living room I just wanted to show you a clip of this somewhat built-in desk. It doesn't really look built-in because it doesn't like really match match all that well, but I just really love these bookshelves from growing together, and then I just fitted in those teeny tiny discs, I think from Parenthood, in between. So moving on to our final townhouse, the one furthest on the left. This is what I like to refer to as the new townhouse. Now I should probably apologize in advance if what I'm about to describe happens to be you, but the couple living here are definitely the wealthiest, and they decided to just totally renovate the townhouse and rip it from any soul it once had. So we've got boring beige and white furniture in like every single room. Everything is supposed to seem very luxurious, big, expensive, and I wanted to add this because it kind of adds to the overall story that these townhouses used to not be anything special, but have increased in value so much over the years that by today's standards they are super expensive. So I imagine that this couple is actually very well off, but purchasing an actual house in this area would be a little bit too much, so that is why they settled for this quite big townhouse. They have a single, very spoiled child, and I feel like they're also the kind of people that have a cat named Princess. I'm pretty sure I didn't keep the footage, but I did eventually go around all of the townhouses and add items for pets. So the elderly couple have an old dog, the colorful big family next door has a cat, the family with a teenager also has a dog, and then these people that we're currently looking at their townhouse, they have the cat named Princess. I wanted to show you just a little bit of decorating, and me doing these two bathrooms was the most cohesive clip, because otherwise it was just me as per usual going around like all over the place and placing items in different townhouses. It was a hot mess. So by now the townhouses are completely furnished and completely decorated, and we are now moving on to the back garden. So this is again the elderly couple. She does flower decorations, and they both like to care for their plants and their bees. And we will go through these gardens pretty quickly. They all have a terrace space that I decorated with just, you know, chairs, tables. I think everyone got a grill, and then that like teeny tiny spot of grass. And I think the reason why I wanted them to not be any bigger was because this left enough space on the rest of the lot to do something that seemed to be a bit more of a communal space. So this is the old townhouse with the teenage daughter, and next to them we have the more luxurious living couple that definitely have the fanciest backyard. So one thing I completely forgot to mention that we can see in this clip is that both of these larger townhouses used to just have a flat back wall, but then I decided to add that little like bay window situation, all because I wanted to use the couches that fit into that spot. So from the gardens we are moving into the communal space, where I'm using a mix of regular items and also debug items. So these planters for trees, which I'm adding in between the street lights, those are debug but just base game. And then I sized down these quite tall trees because I really wanted to have this, is it just called a street even though there are no cars on it, but this little, I guess, like boulevard where it's like covered by the trees. And then I added these small metal posts. I feel like in real life they would be a little bit closer together. They are basically to ensure that no like motorcycles pass through, or cars I guess, but I chose those one particularly because they only took up a quarter tile, and I wanted to make sure that the Sims could very freely pass through so that they would actually use the walkway and not walk in any like weird spots. And then here at the back we are adding a pet area and also a children's playground, and it is because I wanted to add to the story that this is a very children and pet friendly area. And I know that if you actually play with this lot, only the people living here can use it, but the idea is that it is more of like a public park that is just very close to these townhouses. So here towards the end we're doing a little bit of landscaping, again a mix of regular items and also debug items, including this debug fence, because what I personally like to do for landscaping is just to make sure that the lot blends in really naturally with the world. And what's great about a lot of debug items is that if you all place them, you can usually scooch them a little bit off the lot so that we don't really get that like harsh line. So this ended up becoming a much bigger project than I intended for it to be. I've already mentioned that I only really planned to furnish one of the townhouses, and then I had an idea for another one. I was like, okay, I'll furnish that one as well. And then I was like, oh, but it would be really cool to have this like old looking townhouse, and then right next to it have this like fully renovated townhouse. So I just ended up like keeping on going. And while it was a lot of work, I really really love the end result. And of course, if you want to move in here, you can just completely demolish a flat if it doesn't really match how you want to play. This is really just my storytelling to keep myself engaged with the build. I'll always encourage you to use these builds however you like. I will be uploading them as a residential rental, but they don't use any items for rent. So I assume if you don't have that, you can still download the lot and just use it normally. I've loaded up the game so that we can take a look at the final result and everything that we have missed. And I'm a little bit worried, since we do have 4 townhouses, that it might be a little bit long, but feel free to just, you know, skip to another video at any time. I am here for you and nothing else, and I don't expect everyone to watch every single second of a video. But now let us get into these gorgeous townhouses. So we have the green townhouse for the elderly couple, and I've already mentioned that they have a little dog, so they also have a little dog mailbox. They have a pretty simple front garden, and then the kitchen where you did get to see quite a few clips, but we just added a little bit of clutter here in the corner, added some aprons over here, a little picture on the wall, and then most importantly, of course, we added the 2 food bowls. Now I like to add 2 because in real life they would have water and food, even though I know that they only really, you know, need 1, but I think visually it just looks better with 2. Then we have the hallway with the gorgeous wallpaper and just a few little nice decorative pieces. A nice add-on that I quite like is also this little telephone, because I feel like if this is an older couple and they've been living here for so long, they still might have the regular phone that they had set up when they moved in. So I quite like that. For the bathroom, I used the same items from Cottage Living as for the kitchen. That is personally something that I really like, so that things match. And then one little neat detail that I am a little bit, I guess, proud of is that down here I actually custom placed some towels. So these are just the regular towels. I just think they look quite good down here on the shelf. For the bath, I think the only thing I want to mention is that I scooched it a bit into the wall, because I really like that it's just the tile on the wall that becomes a part of the shower, and then you see this a little bit less, but then it looked a little bit weird, so I did add 2 columns to sort of frame the entire thing. Going into the living room, we do have this little shelf with a computer right here at the bay window. I think that's absolutely gorgeous. Then we have our couch, some items for the dog, some pictures for all of their family photos, and then turning around to the other side, I imagine that this are also some family photos. And then I tried to do this like built-in shelving situation. I added like biscuits here on the shelf, some more frames, and also a nice big TV, because I feel like a lot of older people have quite a big TV, you know, to see a little bit better. So yeah, moving on to their back garden. I think you pretty much saw everything in the video. Maybe I added a few other items, and then they have their exit here right for the playground. The blue townhouse for the big colorful family. Of course, out front we have a lot of bicycles. And then moving in, this kitchen you also saw quite a bit of, just because I struggled so much with the color scheme. But again, added a little bit of clutter, and I think also over here, biscuits for the dog, or in this case the cat. Very important. I love this little cat calendar, and of course the 2 pet bowls. Their hallway has the gingham wallpaper. I do quite like that. And then otherwise it is kept quite simple. And then over here we just have some items for the cat. I think you saw a bit of the bathroom, but of course we went ahead and decorated it, just added a few more pieces to make it seem a little bit more lived in. And then the living room, which I just absolutely love, even though like so much is going on, but for gameplay I just think that that works out like so well, because it seems way more lived in. I think I mentioned this in quite a lot of videos, that I feel like for The Sims 4 you need to focus even more on decorating, and it almost have to seem a little bit messy, otherwise it just feels kind of empty. So I really like their children's corner, and then over here an item for the cat, and the desk situation for the children. I just realized that I completely forgot to show the upstairs, so let me just quickly show the upstairs for the elderly couple. We do have their bedroom, which I also think you did see quite a bit of in the speed edit footage. Then we have the office in here, where I also added a few decorative pieces, and then of course a little dog bed for when whoever is working sits here. And then the guest room with the little crochet corner, where I also added a few toys for children, because even though they live like right next door to their grandchildren, I feel like sometimes the children still come over here and they play on this nice rock. And then in the blue townhouse we have the main bedroom. I really like the items that I added in here, and I decided to go for this set of frames, which is more, I guess, like Indian inspired. And it's because I imagine that this couple actually has traveled quite a lot. And in general, I feel like they're the kind of people that focus a lot more on everything that they just like than for things to really match that well. It's more important for them to have items that they just generally enjoy and tell a story and show a bit of their personality. They also have an infant, and I really liked decorating this little small space. I think it's just so cozy and so cute. And then of course they do have the little like cat teddy bear, and they also have that in here in the children's room. So if you want to play with them, I assume that they have a cat that looks like this. But this is the children's room for what I imagine were twins. So they have two at the age of child in Sims 4. And again, I just wanted to add as much personality as possible and make sure that nothing looked like too clean, because I feel like it never really would in a children's bedroom. From here we move on to the old townhouse, so the one that hasn't quite yet been renovated. They also have two bicycles out front. They have the outdated kitchen with a bit of clutter, and then they have a much more modern dining situation. Their hallway has the old wallpaper but a new rug, and their bathrooms also have all of the old tiles but again some newer additions. And then for the living room, I really like this cozy space as well, and I absolutely love this wallpaper. You already saw the desk situation, but here I also added some more clutter. I especially love these like board game items. I love this little taxi, and this is another piece from the country kitchen kit. They also have this kind of bay window situation that I tried to go for, and here I added this base game items that I otherwise normally just put up against the wall like this. And I hadn't really thought about the fact that there's actually like shelves and cabinets on this side, so it really fits quite well into this space. And then I think my favorite part is this one, which is actually a little cute chair, but I thought they would just use it more as like a side table, and then I added a little plant on top. I also quite like adding a little clutter item to a coffee table, again to just make it seem a bit more lived in, because I feel like Sims 4 homes can very quickly be like too bare, and if you wanted to have a bit more personality, I just personally think it's a good idea to add something that looks like it's currently in use. Moving upstairs, this time I remember we have the bedroom. They chose to use the smaller room for their bedroom, so their teenage daughter could have the bigger one. I really like these pieces. They are just base game, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, they come with some sort of career, but I think they're really cool and match this family quite well. And then we also do have this little set of like a closet setup, which I think turned out really nicely as well. This mirror is from Seasons, and then I just lowered it with the tool mod so that it fits a little bit better into this space. Then we have their child's bedroom. You did see quite a bit of this, so only thing I really added is the decoration pieces. Again, like space, and apparently also really like void critters. Then we have the teenage room, and I absolutely love how it turned out. I love this color scheme. In real life, I am more into green, but digitally, if you've ever looked at my banner or my profile picture here on YouTube, you might know that I absolutely love this color combo. I also really like the items, especially this set right here, but also over here, like this family has a dog, and look at how cute this one is. And then of course, like any other teenage girl, you want a mirror, you want a desk, you want another flag. I think the only thing that I was a little bit unsure about was this carpet, because it's a bit much, but I also feel like it kind of works, and otherwise you can just change it. The other color I thought about going with, I think, was this one, but I felt like it was getting a little bit too purple, and instead I wanted to add the like yellow that we also have kind of here in the bed sheets. So yeah, that's what I went with, but change it if you don't like it. Last but not least, we have the renovated townhouse. They have a very simple front yard. Then they have their very up-to-date kitchen. I like the stove, and I also like the fridge. I personally, and I really mean personally, find this kind of kitchen a little bit boring. It's just very plain, and I think to me it very much screams like new apartment, but I understand why it's for some people, why you want something neutral. But they also just have glass table. They have what I imagine is like designer chairs. They of course have a pet ball for their cat Princess, and in general it's just, for me, it's a little bit too neat. But moving on, we have their bathrooms that you saw a little bit of a clip of, also fully renovated. I will say I do really like how this shower from Seasons happened to match this wallpaper perfectly, because that happens so rarely. So that was nice, but otherwise it is just like nice bathrooms. I think it's the kind of bathrooms where anyone looking at it would be like, yeah, that looks good. But again, I would find it to be a little bit too boring if it was actually basically my own. Items for their cat in the hallway, also a bit of items for their cat in the living room, and then again their white and beige furniture, few cat treats, yeah, designer lamp, I imagine, huge big ass TV, and I really didn't know what to add for decorations, but I did remember that we had these magazines with an event a little bit back, and I do quite like those. I also added this picture in the different colors, kind of imagining that it is like a collector's item. I added a lot of books to take up some space, and then also these two, are they called like rosettes? Ribbon? Okay, award ribbon. I guess their cat won like 2 awards, and then for their one child, just a few board games. But I do feel like they're the kind of people where you wouldn't be able to see that they have a child except for their child's bedroom, which is right upstairs. And I do actually kind of like this children's bedroom. I just think it's like so cute. I especially love all of the little lights. I mean, who doesn't like string lights, honestly? And I also do quite like the situation we got going on here. Now, this is a little bit creepy, but I feel like it works in this particular space. This room is also the only room in all of the 4 townhouses that has curtains, because I don't like curtains. I kind of hate curtains, and I especially hate adding them to my Sims 4 builds because I always forget them. So I only really use them as a decorative piece, so you can add your own curtains. Here at the end, I just wanted to show you the back gardens, and then further back we do have the area for the pets. I have personally never used these items, not for playing nor for a build, but maybe that is fun, who knows. It is right next to the small little playground, and while you do have to load into the lot to actually use these items, I do imagine that they are just like public access. I think that's it. If you made it this far, thank you so much for sticking with me through this long tour. I wish you a lovely day. I hope to see you next time, and bye!